You and I met once for lunch at PeopleSoft.
Yeah.
When you were still in consulting and you were thinking about starting the HR forums based on the kind of work you'd done with Tom Peters and using that as a model for applying it to HR. PeopleSoft was my second go at running human resources. I came out from Chicago to the Bank of California and ran human resources at the Bank of California. And I went back to school and ended up getting my master's in clinical psychology and became a marriage family therapist working in East and West Oakland with the criminal justice system and child protective services clients.
So how did you get from the streets of Oakland to the executive suite at PeopleSoft?
Yeah, people that I'd worked with at the Bank of California, Dave Duffield, who's now just run people who I had known at the Bank of California said, hey, PeopleSoft might be a place where you ought to consider. One being Steve Zarati, and he had worked for me at the Bank of California and was then running human resources at PeopleSoft, and said, would you be interested in coming? You usually don't go into East and West Oakland with the clientele that I had and say, that's where we're going to get our next HR person from. And I did vow when I went to PeopleSoft to do things differently that time. I think in my earliest days I had looked upward too much, and at this point I just decided to really focus on the team and look into the organization. But I think the most important thing I ever did was advise you to get John Radford on your advisory committee. And that I thought he would be a perfect advisor for you. You know, a couple of things that really stand out, and I don't know if you still do them, were the kind of the yearly seminars that you would have. And I remember one that had Meg Whitman at it, but one of the things that I was kind of proud of, for another session, which was really pretty high-powered, I got us Bob Joss, who at the time was the dean at the Stanford Business School. And I think that was really pretty unique. Some incredibly high-powered business folks really talking into the HR side of things. So I've always felt that HR was really kind of on the low end of the food chain when it came to the structures of organizations. So some of the things that were done through these kind of forum activities really, I think, brought HR into maybe into a level in terms of which I felt it belonged.
So when I came out to the Bay Area, where I was head of HR for Knight Ridder, suddenly I discovered this wonderful community of HR executives, including the HR forums that was just launching itself. And you reached out to me, along with many other people, and invited me to participate. And it was the introduction to a wonderful community of people who helped me through so many difficult times. I just can't tell you what it meant to me. Well, I have many moments I remember in the HR forums, REI. I remember those great conference calls on every topic under the sun. But I guess if I have to think about one experience, it was the time we had that meeting with senior executives of corporations, people like Meg Whitman, she was one of them. It was interesting to me because I made assumptions about the relationship I had with my colleagues, and I saw that I was very, very lucky. I had a working relationship that was collegial and that allowed for the kind of transparency and honesty and truth to power that not everybody in the Bay Area enjoyed with their executives. But I admired the way everybody worked with whatever the luck of their draw was in terms of their colleagues to try and find a working way to do what they needed to do for their organizations. And we all found different solutions. I learned from others, and I also came to appreciate what I had. As you know, In 2006, Knight Ridder was sold. And at that time, I decided to take early retirement. I was about to turn 55. It seemed a good idea. I was tired, to be honest. But I had dreams, and there were things that when you're a busy HR executive, as all your colleagues know, you don't have time to do. One of my dreams was to paint. I wanted to garden. I wanted to have a personal life, to be honest. I moved very shortly after we retired. I moved down to the Santa Barbara area, to Santa Ynez, and I winter in Florida, in the Miami area, down in the Florida Keys, which is where I have kept a home since I lived in Miami. And we have a wonderful life. I paint in oils. I show in a gallery in Los Olivos, which is right near Santa Ynez. I paint here in Florida. But I do miss the community in the Bay Area. I miss you and all my friends in human resources who meant so much to me then and who I still remember as great mentors and friends. But life moves on, and I'm in a new chapter.
So as I recall, REA, it was back in the early 90s when I was at Silicon Graphics. And, you know, that 10 years at Silicon Graphics was just an awesome chapter in my career. And I remember you finding me and insisting that I check out the forum. And so over that period of time, and then well into through my Yahoo years and even into my Agilent years, I ended up being involved in one way, shape, or form every once in a while. So it was great fun. Things. There's one specific moment that I remember that I know you remember as well, because we've talked about this one. When I was relatively new in my Yahoo role, probably about 6 to 9 months in, it was when the economy was still booming. We hadn't yet hit the bust, but the bust was looming. And the big dilemma I was faced with was everybody who'd been at Yahoo a while was independently wealthy because the equity was so high and base comp was so low. And the dilemma was, how did we start bringing in the next generation of leaders who had more ability and interest in scaling the company and a little less risk tolerance? So we had to shift the mix without alienating the current employees and really attracting the next generation of employees. And at that time, that was about 13 years ago, that was a real dilemma. I hadn't experienced that before, and I remember talking about it in the forum, and everyone was listening with bated breath. And then you asked some question. I don't remember the question, but I remember it catalyzed just a great conversation. And after that forum, 2 or 3 people reached out to me, and we had some great follow-on conversations. Unfortunately, we found a path forward.
I remember you leading the conversation about the transition from a fairness and consistency-based compensation model to a new customized model for each employee. It was a paradigm shift.
It was, and interestingly, once we figured out the mechanics of how we could do a little bit more of that custom mix for individuals, the real challenge was a change management challenge. How did we help all the existing employees understand that there would be some newcomers who were making more cash than they were, but would never, ever have the total wealth that they had? You know, it's great fun. I feel really fortunate. I'm here at the Technological Leadership Institute inside the College of Science and Engineering at the University of Minnesota. And our focus is all about the business of technology.
It sounds like your passion is still sort of the intersection of business and learning.
It is, and you know, the learning is really the key, REA, because what makes me tick is learning. And that's the best part of being back at the university. Every day I learn something because I'm a bit out of my own comfort zone, and there's no better way to learn than to teach.
In 1999, I was the Vice President of Human Resources at Centerbeam in San Jose, and I had no, it was a lonely job for a period of time because when I first got there, I was the only person, and it was a far cry from what I had experienced at Advanced Micro Devices. I think the general memory I have is how much of a respite it was to be able to join the group, whether it was at the different sessions that you put together or dinners that you put together. It was just a great way to reconnect to the network of people that was available, and to get refueled, to go back into the day-to-day of the challenges at Centerbeam. It was really, I don't know, it was just very much a way for me to recharge each time. Well, I think the thing that was probably most fun was being able to connect with all of the other people and the different speakers that were invited to the forum sessions. I remember Tammy Erickson, for example, whom I later had a chance to work with, was just a wonderful way to be educated about issues, in that case, the issues that she has been studying for a number of years now on generations in the workforce. I'm currently the Vice President of Human Resources for Maps and Navigation in Oakland, California, and I've had the luxury over the years to continue to be associated with the forums, and that's also been a continuing way for me to stay connected to the network of people and to continue to participate. Still enjoy coming down to the peninsula and joining people with, in the meetings and the dinners. So it's been a wonderful way to continue that connection. That I hope that you all continue to have the type of opportunity for community and conversation that I know we've had over the years with the HR forums. We'll miss it very much, and we'll miss all of you as well.
I think it might have been about 2002 when I had just returned to National Semiconductor, and I had just been appointed to the head of human resources for the corporation. And my rationale for getting involved in HR forums was to widen the perspective of the human resources team at National. I remember you brought the breakfast, a couple of the breakfast meetings, maybe one or two of the lunch meetings to our campus. So that was very memorable events for me. The HR community returns to the same subject time after time. So, we had lots of discussions about paying for performance, and then there were often discussions all about the wisdom in having, rigorous performance management systems as opposed to more open loop performance management systems. Lots and lots of discussions over the years about executive compensation and stock compensation. It's also amusing that the same topics that we've been discussing for the last decade or more, are still there on the table, largely unsolved.
I wonder if you've seen any evolution or any change in any of those topics over the years.
Well, one of the topics is a perennial is, human resources individuals having a so-called seat at the executive table. I got so tired of that whole conversation. But I would have to say that over the last 10, 15 years, not only do senior HR leaders in the Valley have a seat at the executive table, they have a very critical role to play, a very influential role to play in their companies. And your host for your upcoming event, Stephen, of course, is a great example of that. Deborah Barber, Eileen Nelson, Eileen Schloss, all the people that I've known and admired for all these years are great examples of individuals who play a pivotal role in their companies. They have really advanced the profession. As you're aware, National Semiconductor was acquired by Texas Instruments just over a year ago, and they paid me a lot of money to go away.
That's nice.
And so I've taken them up on that opportunity. Other than doing a little bit of consulting last year, that's how I'm spending my time, doing a little bit of traveling and reconnecting and trying to bring some of the balance that I lost over the years back into my life. And doing a little bit of mentoring of executives and HR leaders. I would say, by the way, that is one of the things that I've got to congratulate you for, REA. Creating these mentoring activities, mentoring opportunities, everything you did with the HR forums over the years. As I say, you were pretty pivotal in creating a strong HR community in the Bay Area.
I had recently accepted the vice president of HR at Apple Computer, working for Steve Jobs, and it was the first time I'd ever been in the top job. It was a company in major transition. It was just before Apple had released the new iMac, and I was sitting there in an organization that was really going through dramatic change. So I think it must have been Deborah Engel that introduced me to the forums. And when I reached out to both Deborah Engel and Deborah Barber, I remember vividly they met me for dinner one night. And so they told me about the forum, and one of them sent me the email connection, and there you have it. First of all, I loved the executive dinners, and it was such a great place to share what was really going on behind the scenes in each of our lives, in our roles in the different companies. And I gained so much about how to do some things differently in my own job by listening to, some of the greats of our time, the Eddie Sweeneys, the Stephen Rice, the Deborah Barbers, the Marianne Jacksons, Eileen Nelson. There was always something provocative that we were talking about that inspired me to go off and do something differently. I had asked Bill Krause, who was my CEO at the time, when I was the head of human resources at Caspian Networks, if he would be willing to come and be a keynote speaker. And he absolutely immediately said he would love to do that. And so one of the things we did at that event was talk about trust and leadership in the workplace. And from there, right after that conference, when we went back to work, we started working ourselves on some new trust initiatives. And even though we ended up closing the doors after 4 years, the people that remained to the very end talked about what a fantastic culture that was created there. These our colleagues and our characters, and none of us were shy. I remember you tried very hard to facilitate us. Those were the best nights. And I think in those times, that's where we really built such a strong allegiance with each other and a friendship that formed as a result. Joined Macrovision as the EVP of HR, and I inherited a team of HR professionals that were really working at a very tactical level. We had a full day offsite, and I had called on my colleagues to come and be panelists for me, and without a hesitation. I had Steve Rice, I had Eddie Sweeney, Deborah Barber was able to make it that night, but she sent a colleague, and Terry Iyer from HP. And I never would have been able to get that level of support if I hadn't built those relationships through the forum. It was just magical. Oh my gosh, well, the reason I'm not there in person, and I absolutely would be if I was still in Silicon Valley, is because I'm out here in New York City. I'm the EVP of Human Resources and Real Estate and Facilities for a phenomenal company called Metadata Solutions. New York City is so vibrant, it's so diverse, it's so exciting. The speed here and the pace is incredible. So I'm just so excited to be here and doing this work and feeling like, this is my last gig and I can leave a legacy. With social media being so popular these days, and especially for, the next level of HR leaders that are coming up, I want to make sure that you never lose the personal engagement and the personal trust. So don't just depend on social media. Figure out other ways to get face-to-face and build those relationships.